Delighted now to be joined by Chief Cynthia Renaud and Vincent Talluci to talk about a new initiative at the IACP, the Policy Council. Well, both thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. So thank you.
Happy to, Stephen. Thank you.
So the Policy Council, Vince, give us a little bit of background into the Policy Council.
So the Policy Council that we know today began its thinking about how that construct should be probably 4 years ago now. And we had a good problem to have. We would have 30-some committees that were doing important work of the association, but many times they were doing them not as coordinated, ideally, as we would hope. There was a bit of disconnect between what an oversight role was, and there was some disconnect with staffing. So between the staffing, the oversight, and the committee, we wanted to think through how best to coordinate those activities to make sure that we're maximizing the value of the work, the important work that they're doing to the broader association.
So Chief Renaud, you're chair of the Policy Council, am I right?
Yes, I do have one section of the Policy Council groups.
So how's it working in practice?
So in practice what it does is across the 30-some committees of the IACP, it groups them together in like-minded groups, for lack of a better term. So for me, my committees focus around investigations. So I have investigations, vehicle crimes investigations, forensic sciences, environmental crimes, but they're all forward-facing, active, investigative councils and committees, and they touch on topics that pertain to investigations. So for me, it allows me to focus on one area. It allows me to link together these groups whose one committee's work will touch on another committee's work. It allows for cleaner communications, quicker communications between the committees, and allows me to streamline their needs to the IACP staff and to my fellow members of the executive board.
So what's the Policy Council's strategic framework?
So the strategic framework that the Policy Councils came up with, so in April of this year, for the first time we convened the vast majority of the respective committees in one spot to really get a better sense of what it is a strategic direction would look like for the association and maximizing those 1,150 members of the association that are engaged in committees. We asked them from a committee perspective to come up with priorities. We then went into their policy councils and then we asked them to sharpen those priorities a little bit more. And then, as Chief Renaud said, the executive board really focused on, again, sharpening those priorities that much more. The framework that we came up with has different elements. The overarching lenses include making sure that we're looking at everything through emerging technologies, evidence-based approaches, as well as from an officer safety and wellness. And then components underneath, we want to make sure that we're talking about trust always, as we've been talking about for the past several years, particularly with the focus. We want to make sure that we're keeping a global perspective in mind at all times,
Sure.
given we are the International Association of Chiefs of Police,
Yeah.
in addition to making sure that we're developing leaders of tomorrow while focusing on this framework and sharpening, again, the focus for the association of where we should be looking.
It's a really good idea, isn't it? Because one of the key tenets of the IACP is your advocacy and your communication with, federal policymakers on a global basis, really. So this really enables you to sharpen that work, doesn't it?
It does.
It does, and it really helps coordinate the communication between the various countries. So, for example, the Vehicle Crimes Committee, they've done a lot of work with our Canadian partners because there are so many issues with stolen vehicles coming across the border and the ability for two countries to share information. And so when the committees are grouped together under like-minded policy councils, these types of topics that come up can then also be shared with the other committees, for example, environmental crimes, who have different needs in different countries based on the varying environmental impacts that they're facing. And so what one committee does, looking at sharing communication cross-border for stolen vehicles, leads to what another committee does, sharing communication about environmental crimes from South America to the European continent. And so it's these ideas that then filter from one committee to another because we're all doing the same job. But streamlining communications and focusing effort is one thing that these policy councils are really geared at fostering and helping.
Well, both, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
ICP TV has all the coverage you want from this year's conference. Make sure to explore all of our content, which is updated each and every day of the conference, to stay up to date with all the very latest news in the world of policing.